For years I mastered the sacred art of stillness. In those echoing halls of marble and shadow, I moved like a ghost carved from loyalty, the only guard who dared meet the Alpha King's eyes without trembling. I was his beta, his shield, trusted, untouchable, a brother in arms forged in duty. Every sunrise, I swallowed the chemicals that silenced my truth, poisoning myself just to keep my heart from betraying its pulse. I lived wrapped in the illusion of control, convincing my body that it was immune to him, immune to the pull of his power, his scent, his presence. And he believed it. He believed me. He treated me like an equal, like someone sculpted from steel instead of yearning. But lies are delicate things. They crack long before they shatter. One storm-drenched night, I missed a single bitter dose. Just one. And suddenly the world shifted. My scent no longer smelled of duty and rain. It unfurled into something forbidden, something sweet, something that called to the deepest, most hidden part of me. When the king halted mid-step, breath sharp, eyes glowing a feral gold, my soul knew before my mind understood. The air between us tightened. His nostrils flared. His gaze locked onto me like a claim spoken in silence. The game was over. My mask was dust. And in the hollow between two heartbeats, I realized the truth I had spent years trying to bury. I wasn't just exposed. I wasn't just discovered. I was his, and I always had been. The cold was a living thing, sharp and hungry, clawing at the rough-hewn timber of Oakhaven Lodge. Outside, the midwinter solstice, December, had delivered not just a snowstorm, but a blizzard of biblical proportions, trapping King Ronan and me miles from Blackwood Keep. It was the result of what would forever be known as the Hunt disaster. I pressed my back against the damp stone hearth, trying to draw any residual warmth. My teeth were chattering, but it wasn't just the mountain chill that had seized me. It was the deep, seismic tremor of a biological clock running wild. I was fighting a silent war, a battle of chemistry. For the last 4 hours, I'd been pumping out the beta scent I had cultivated through sheer will and pharmaceutical dedication. Rain and fear. It was an astringent, almost metallic scent, utterly unattractive to alphas, giving me the cloak of neutrality I needed to wear the Sterling Guard sigil and serve in the most elite military unit in the kingdom. But the suppressor's residue was thinning, leaching out of my system with agonizing speed, exacerbated by the chilling proximity of the most powerful alpha I had ever known. King Ronan Alexander Sterling, 32, was crouched near the center of the lodge's main room, his broad shoulders straining the thick wool of his hunting tunic. He was focused on building a sustainable fire, his movements economical and precise. He carried an aura of effortless dominance, and even in jeans and worn boots, he was every inch the ruler of the Northern Kingdom. He looked up, catching my gaze. "Still cold, Hayes? Come closer. We can survive the night, but we need that fire to keep the blood flowing." "Yes, Your Majesty," I rasped, trying to sound steady, pragmatic. The Kinsley he knew, the beta he trusted. He gave me a rough, familiar nod, the sort of casual acknowledgement he gave his comrades. He tossed a thin piece of dry bark onto the kindling. "It's a shame we lost the rest of the company, but frankly, I prefer the quiet. No whining Omegas to manage." The casual dismissal was a dagger. He didn't mean to hurt me. He meant it as a compliment to the tomboy beta he thought I was, praising me for not displaying the distracting sensibilities of the women at court. But internally, the Omega in me was screaming, not just at the insult to my kind, but at the sheer agonizing effort required to remain unmoving when his movements, his breathing, and the scent of damp leather and mountain cedar, his alpha signature, were making my skin prickle. I tried to stabilize my breathing, focusing on the rough texture of the wall behind me, fighting the dizzying rush in my blood. Hold the line, Kinsley." Ronan shifted, ripping a piece of kindling with a sudden, powerful motion. The small exertion released a pulse of his true scent, raw, heady musk, spiced with ancient power. It was unguarded, confident, believing utterly that I was biologically immune to his pull. That pulse shattered the last of my beta composure. My body retaliated violently. A wave of heat, liquid fire, started deep in my abdomen and rushed upward, pooling behind my eyes. I gasped, sucking in a shuddering breath, trying to compress the rising tide of pheromones attempting to escape. The rain and fear scent evaporated instantly. It was replaced by something entirely different. Something sweet, cloying, rich, something undeniable. I clamped my hand over my mouth, pressing my forehead against the cold stone, willing myself to disappear. Ronan froze. His hands, mid-motion over the kindling, went still. The lodge, previously filled with the sounds of the storm and the crackle of tiny flames, became eerily silent. He hadn't looked up, yet I knew the moment the scent hit him. His deep, even breathing hitched, drawing in a sharp, involuntary inhale, a true alpha sniff, not a casual breath. He slowly, agonizingly stood up, turning to face me. His piercing blue eyes, usually sharp and focused on the pragmatic world, were wide, dilated, and dark with confusion, and then, immediately, with raw, predatory hunger. "Hayes?" he murmured, his voice thick, unrecognizable. It wasn't the voice of the king. It was the growl of an ancient creature responding to a biological imperative. I couldn't speak. I could only shake my head, tears of humiliation and desperation streaming down my cheeks. He took a step toward me. "What? What is that smell?" He was inhaling deeply again, his nostrils flaring. The scent of honey and wildflowers, my true omega scent, was broadcasting across the small space like a siren. It was intoxicating, potent, and signaled a prime, unbonded omega entering heat. "Stay back, Your Majesty," I whispered, the plea barely audible over the roaring in my ears. The heat was overwhelming now, making my limbs heavy and useless. "Please, I need air." He ignored me, his kingly demeanor dissolving entirely into pure, instinctual alpha command. He closed the distance in 2 long strides, stopping inches from me. He didn't touch me, but the sheer force of his presence pinned me to the wall. "Rain and fear," he said, his voice now a low, dangerous rumble. "That's what you always smelled like. Beta, competent, unbothered." He leaned closer, his eyes scanning my face, now flushed and slick with sweat. "That scent is gone. This is sweet. This is intoxication. This is impossible." He caught my wrist, his grip iron, and dragged my hand away from my mouth. "The medical exam confirmed beta status," Ronan stated, his tone escalating from confusion to outright fury. "Every guard is screened. You swore the oath of silence under the strictest review." I lied, I admitted, the confession tasting like ash. I took potent suppressors. They stopped working. He released my wrist, stepping back slightly, his chest heaving. The realization was striking him, not just the lie of my biology, but the profound nature of my deceit. He had trusted me with his life, allowed me into his most vulnerable spaces, believing I was chemically incapable of feeling his pull. His eyes fell to my neck, where the powerful omega pheromones originated, and then to the exposed skin above my uniform collar. He groaned, a sound deep in his chest that shook the very foundations of the lodge. "Impossible," he repeated, but this time, the word was laced with awe, not anger. He stepped closer again, his hand lifting, not to restrain, but to trace the curve of my jawline, a gesture utterly foreign to our previous relationship. "You were right here," he breathed, his thumb brushing my cheekbone, his scent overwhelming me, mixing with mine to create a dizzying cocktail of desire and terror. "My comrade, my most trusted guard, and you were my mate." I froze. The heat, the shame, the fear, it all coalesced into pure, agonizing dread. I had focused so fiercely on hiding my biology that I had never considered the possibility of a fated mate bond. It was a myth the elite alphas often chased, a romantic fantasy that rarely materialized. "No, Your Majesty," I pleaded, trying to twist away. "That's irrational. It's the heat. It's the proximity of an alpha." He cut me off, his voice dropping to a possessive, dangerous whisper. "Do not deny what is yours, Kinsley. I have spent 32 years searching for this precise connection, this exquisite scent. You didn't just lie to your king about being a beta. You lied about being my queen." The casual pats on the back were gone. The camaraderie was incinerated. In its place was a fierce, proprietary intensity that terrified me more than the storm outside. He looked down at the sterling guard sigil pinned haphazardly to my uniform near my heart. With a sudden, forceful gesture, He reached out and ripped the silver brooch off my jacket. "This beta uniform," he said, dropping the sigil onto the stone floor where it clattered and spun, "is a farce. It is finished." He stepped away, raking a hand through his dark hair, the possessive alpha instinct overriding every political and practical thought. The transition was instantaneous. The friend who valued my competence was replaced by the alpha who valued my security and my compliance. "This operation is scrubbed," Ronan declared, his voice hard and absolute, echoing the gravity of the fated mate declaration. "You will not return to Blackwood Keep as a guard. You will not return to active duty. You are grounded, Kinsley, effective immediately. You are under my personal protection and surveillance." The declaration struck deeper than the cold. My career, my independence, my painstakingly constructed identity, all wiped out by a single biological accident. "Your Majesty, I can still fight," I insisted, desperate to claw back some control. "My skills haven't vanished because I happen to be an Omega. I am still the warrior you relied on." He scoffed, moving to secure the heavy oak door against the relentless wind. He didn't even look at me when he delivered the final crushing blow. "A warrior is needed to guard the kingdom. An Omega is needed to secure the legacy," he stated, his authority absolute. "My focus now is the securing mandate. I need to protect the most valuable asset in this kingdom, and that is you, my newfound queen." He turned back, his gaze lingering on the fragile spot where the sterling guard sigil had been. "You were strong enough to fool me for 3 years, Hayes. Now, prove you are strong enough to fight the conventions of our world, but this time, by my side, and under my protection." I stood trembling, not from the cold or the heat, but from the terrifying realization that my new fight wouldn't be against foreign enemies, but against the very king who had captured my heart years ago, a king who now saw me only as the fragile, priceless glass he desperately needed to keep safe and secured. The battlefield had shrunk to the suffocating confines of his possessive love. My life as Kinsley, the Beta Guard, was over. My destiny as the Omega mate had just begun. A destiny I now had to prove did not erase the woman beneath the biology. The silver brooch lay on the stone, catching the dim firelight, a broken promise on the frigid floor. The sterling guard sigil, the symbol of 3 years of grueling service and meticulous deception, was nothing more than discarded metal. Ronan's words, "This beta uniform is a farce. It is finished," echoed the death knell of my old life. I felt the exposed skin of my chest where the sigil had resided, now cold and vulnerable. It was not just the badge that was gone, it was the armor. The heat cycle, previously a muffled internal threat, surged violently, turning my blood to molten syrup. My skin felt too tight, flushed bright red under the fluorescent lodge light. The Omega pheromones I was now freely producing were overwhelming the rustic air of Oakhaven, wrapping around Ronan like an irresistible fog. He stood near the door, his massive frame blocking the only exit, embodying the absolute authority of the king, amplified tenfold by the primal possessiveness of a newly scented alpha. He was no longer just protecting his realm, he was staking his claim. "Look at you," he murmured, his voice heavy with a frightening blend of adoration and severity. "A warrior, you say? You can barely stand." I pushed myself off the wall, trying to project the discipline that had been ingrained in me during my years in the Sterling Guard barracks. My knees wobbled. The exhaustion of fighting the suppressants for hours, coupled with the biological demand of the premature heat, was debilitating. "My physical state does not diminish my training, Ronan," I insisted, forcing the words past a throat suddenly dry. "I was the best you had. I earned my position. You will not wipe away my service because of biology." He turned fully toward me, taking a measured step back into the firelight. His eyes, those piercing blue pools, were darker than I had ever seen them, reflecting the animal behind the crown. "I won't wipe away your service, Kinsley. I am elevating it," he corrected, his tone dangerously smooth. "You served the king as a guard. Now you will serve the realm as its queen. This is a far more critical posting. The stability of the kingdom rests on the succession, and you, my fated mate, are the key to that stability." The word stability sounded too cold, too political, stripped of any genuine care. He spoke of me as an object, a political asset, fulfilling the very role I had spent my entire adult life running from. The hidden jewel in the mud, indeed, now dragged out and polished for display, regardless of whether I wanted to be seen. I do not need protection. I need a weapon, a mission, and a chance to prove I am still capable, I pleaded, taking a hesitant step toward him, hoping my proximity wouldn't completely unhinge the king. He stopped me instantly, not with a touch, but with a wall of pure alpha dominance. His scent, already potent, intensified, pinning me in place. It was a clear, instinctual command. Stand down. Obey. You misunderstand the nature of this threat, Ronan countered, shaking his head slowly. As my guard, you faced daggers and cannon fire. As my fated mate and a newly discovered Omega, you face the aristocracy, the political maneuvering, and every alpha in the neighboring territories who would attempt to steal what is mine. You face exposure, Kinsley. You face danger I cannot allow you to fight alone. He moved to the small rustic table and picked up a heavy leather-bound map, spreading it out. He wasn't even pretending to discuss our immediate predicament anymore. He was strategizing my new incarceration. The moment we step back into Blackwood Keep, the securing mandate begins. You will require a complete overhaul of your environment. New quarters, round-the-clock protection. The kind of protection that keeps you hidden, not exposed on battlements. A surge of white-hot fury, combined with the desperate yearning of my heat cycle, made me lash out. Hidden? You mean caged? I didn't claw my way into your elite guard to be shoved into the nursery wing with the court Omegas who knit all day. I hate that life, Ronan. I hate being reduced to biology. He dropped the map, the sound muffled by the storm outside. The easy camaraderie was entirely gone. His face hardened into the mask of the ruthless king I had heard whispered about in the barracks, the alpha who had formalized the repression of Omegas in the year of the Great Calm. You hate being reduced to biology? He challenged, his voice dangerously low. He walked slowly back towards me, his gaze locked on my hips, a primal assessment that sent shivers down my spine. Then understand this, my hidden mate. Your biology is currently screaming my name. Your skin is damp with the scent of mating readiness. This is not a political discussion. This is absolute, undeniable biological fact. He reached out, and with shocking gentleness, touched the flushed skin of my neck, just below my ear. I involuntarily leaned into the touch, a whimper escaping my lips, a betrayal by my own body that felt like the ultimate humiliation. The beta disguise gave you freedom. The Omega truth gives you power, Kinsley, Ronan continued, his breath warm against my temple. But it is a power I must control. Your life is no longer your own to risk. You belong to the crown, and to me. This was the climax of the conflict, the raw moment where his possessiveness completely eclipsed his respect for my identity. He withdrew his hand, but the effect remained. The immediate surrender of my Omega biology was terrifying. He reached into his tunic pocket and retrieved a small, heavy item wrapped in a piece of velvet cloth. I recognized the outline immediately, even before he unveiled it. It was the Royal Omega Collar, an intricate piece of gold jewelry typically reserved for the chief consort, symbolizing protection, status, and ultimate possession. It was heavy, intricately carved with the sterling crest, and sickeningly beautiful. We need to establish boundaries quickly. The transition will be messy. Every alpha in Blackwood Keep will smell this, Ronan stated, holding the heavy gold collar up, the metal catching the light. My stomach dropped. No, I will not wear that. That is not protection. That is a leash. It's what you force the concubines to wear. It is a necessity, he corrected, stepping closer until I could feel the intense radiating heat of his body. It is keyed to my scent signature. When you wear this, any subordinate alpha will register your claimed status immediately. It is protection from unwanted advances, Kinsley, and it is a declaration of ownership. His use of the word ownership felt like a branding iron across my soul. I was facing the reality of my deception's end. I hadn't just lost my job. I had lost my autonomy. I backed away, stumbling slightly, fighting the overwhelming urge to simply collapse into his arms and let the heat consume me. You said I was the warrior you trusted. You praised my competence. Ronan followed, his face grim. I did. And that warrior is still there. But right now she is overshadowed. I will not risk you, Kinsley. Not now that I have found you. You will do this. You will wear the collar, and you will wait for me to manage the political fallout. He approached me, and I stood frozen, my limbs uselessly heavy. The battle was over, at least this immediate physical one. I was trapped by the storm, my own biological urgency, and the absolute command of the Alpha King. He secured the heavy gold collar around my neck. It was cold against my feverish skin, a stark, suffocating weight replacing the absent lightness of the sterling guard sigil. The weight was unbearable, not physically, but emotionally. It signaled the end of my life as the tough, independent beta. As soon as the clasp clicked shut, Ronan inhaled deeply, a sound of profound satisfaction. He placed his hands on my shoulders, his powerful gaze holding mine. This is not a cage, Kinsley. It is an investment. I want the warrior too, but she must operate within the parameters of her true identity. I will teach you how to fight this war from the inside of the palace walls. You will learn to use your power, not just suppress it. He didn't offer comfort or apologies. He offered a mandate. My eyes burned with unshed tears, but I refused to cry. I was the Omega, yes, but I was also the woman who survived 3 years in the barracks, the woman who had earned the respect of a king. I might be wearing the royal Omega collar, but I would not be defined by it. I focused on the cold weight of the metal. It would not be a symbol of my defeat, but a reminder of the fight ahead. I would not allow the securing mandate to turn me into fragile, priceless glass. Ronan pulled me against his chest, the heavy scent of alpha musk and power enveloping me completely. The heat in my core surged in response, painful but undeniable. Until the heat passes, we stay here, he commanded, resting his chin on my head. Then, we return to Blackwood Keep, and the real fight begins. You tried to prove your strength by running from what you are. Now, you will prove your strength by owning it, by my side. I pressed my face against the rough wool of his tunic, hating the feeling of weakness, but acknowledging the temporary tactical defeat. I had survived the storm, the loss of my inhibitors, and the shattering revelation. Now, the final battle was internal, proving that the warrior who wore the sigil still existed beneath the Omega who now wore the collar. I was trapped, secured, and claimed, but I was not broken. The king thought his destiny was to keep his newfound queen safe. My destiny was to prove to him that his queen was just as dangerous, and just as capable, as his former guard. The lodge was sealed, the storm raged, and my campaign for re-entry into my own life had just begun. The heavy gold of the Royal Omega collar felt like a brand, not jewelry. It radiated a cold weight against my feverish skin, a stark declaration of sovereignty that nullified every hard-won step of my past 3 years. I could feel the intricate carving of the sterling crest dig slightly into my throat, an immediate, constant reminder that I was no longer Kinsley Hayes, elite guard, but property of the crown. Ronan's hands remained on my shoulders, his scent of rich cedar and winter ozone now overpowering the small lodge, intensified by the proximity and the biological pull of my heat cycle. He was radiating satisfaction, a conquering alpha who had finally found his prize. The shift from trusted comrade to territorial male was complete, horrifyingly absolute. Investment, I repeated, the word tasting like ash. You speak of me like I'm a mine or a treaty. I am Kinsley. I am the guard who saved your life near the northern pass last summer. And I am the king who values assets, Kinsley, Ronan countered, his expression softening slightly, attempting to convey affection where only control existed. Saving my life was an act of loyalty from a soldier. Securing the succession is an act of destiny that affects every person in this kingdom. My reaction to you is proportionate to your value. I will not apologize for protecting what is mine, especially when mine is my fated mate, an Omega capable of carrying the next heir. He gently turned me, forcing me to face the rough timber wall instead of him. He ran a large, calloused thumb over the gold plating of the collar where the crest rested. The touch, proprietary and deeply intimate, sent a confusing wave of submission and rage through my system. This collar is the only thing that will stop the other alphas at Blackwood Keep from attempting to stake their own claim the moment they sent you, Ronan explained, his voice low and serious. Do you think your quick wits and beta training will shield you from them? They won't see the warrior. They will smell the opportunity. The sheer political reality was a freezing blast against my internal fire. I knew the court of Blackwood Keep. I had witnessed how the Omegas were sequestered, pampered, and utilized, always politically neutral, never powerful. I had fought tooth and nail to avoid that gilded cage. I won't be one of them, I whispered, fighting the sudden, agonizing urge to turn and press myself against him. The heat was escalating, demanding relief that only he could provide, and the biological betrayal was excruciating. You won't be, he agreed, his hands sliding down to rest on my hips, pulling my body back into the curve of his. You are the queen, but the rules still apply. We must manage the transition. You have worn the Sterling Guard sigil for 3 years, a symbol of freedom and anonymity. Now you wear the collar, a symbol of commitment and restriction. We are playing a game of politics with very high stakes. He pressed a kiss to the back of my head, an act of dominance disguised as tenderness. You said you wanted a weapon, a mission. Your mission is to survive the political battlefield and maintain the facade of the untouchable queen. You will still fight, Kinsley, just not with a sword. This was the final, devastating blow, the complete removal of my chosen identity. The warrior was relegated to the background, and the Omega was forced to the forefront. My independent spirit rebelled against his absolute certainty. We stood there for a long moment, the scent of Alpha and Omega mingling, thick and intoxicating. The cabin felt too small, the air charged with unspoken tension. The storm outside Oakhaven Lodge continued its relentless assault, mirroring the turmoil raging within me. Suddenly, a realization struck me, sharp and clear despite the haze of my heat. I had always relied on my physical capability, my training at the Sterling Guard barracks, to prove my worth. Ronan had respected that beta competence. If I couldn't fight with a sword, I had to prove my strength in another way, my control. I pushed away from him, taking 2 shaky steps toward the cold stone hearth, forcing distance between us. I needed to reassert my mind's authority over my body. You trust my discipline, Ronan. You trusted me with your life, I said, turning back to face him, trying to keep my voice even and steady despite the tremors running through my core. If you truly believe I am capable of ruling, then you must believe I can control this. I am not a hysterical Omega. I looked down at the collar. This thing only protects me from other alphas. It doesn't protect me from your possessiveness, and it certainly doesn't protect you from my decisions. Ronan looked utterly lethal. His muscles tensed beneath his tunic. He had been so focused on securing my external safety that he hadn't considered the internal resistance. Be careful, Kinsley, he warned, his voice a low growl, edged with the pure, ancient sound of Alpha command. Do not confuse your momentary freedom in this cabin with the reality of my authority. You are struggling against a biological imperative that is designed to make you yield. This was the moment, the true climax of our conflict, not about the collar or the past, but about the absolute impossibility of my future under his rule. I had to push back hard, or risk being smothered completely. I took a deep, shaky breath, fighting the dizziness. My sharp gray eyes met his piercing blue ones. I let a small, defiant burst of my Omega pheromones, the sweet scent of honey and wildflowers, mix with the aggressive, fearful smell of rain that had once been my beta cover. It was a conscious, painful act of provocation. You want me to own my power? I challenged, my voice rising. Then let me own my decision. If I am capable of leading, I am capable of choosing who I stand next to. If you take away my mission, my purpose, if you try to turn me into a relic wrapped in gold, you lose the warrior you claim to value. He moved then, fast and smooth, covering the distance between us in 2 powerful strides. His hands cupped my face, forcing me to look only at him. The intensity of his gaze felt like a physical pressure, demanding compliance. You think I don't value the warrior? Ronan murmured, his breath hot against my cheek. The warrior is what I crave. The competence, the sharpness, the absolute lack of pretense. But the warrior cannot exist without the queen, Kinsley. Not now. He lowered his head, and I braced myself for a kiss, an ultimate submission I wasn't sure I could fight. But he didn't kiss me. He leaned in and flooded the air between us with a terrifying wave of pure, concentrated alpha pheromones. Authority, mating interest, and raw possessive demand. It was an instinctive, overwhelming biological weapon. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. My knees buckled completely. A deep, guttural moan tore from my chest, utterly involuntary. Every nerve ending in my body lit up, screaming for him to claim me, to take the heat away, to enforce his will. The mental defenses I had painstakingly constructed over 3 years crumbled into dust. I collapsed against him, sobbing not from pain, but from the humiliation of absolute biological defeat. The Royal Omega collar pressed into my skin, the weight suddenly confirming its purpose. I was claimed, and my body was the final, inescapable proof. Ronan held me tightly, his massive frame a shelter and a prison. He stroked my hair, his triumph evident in the deep, rumbling purr vibrating through his chest. "You tried to fight destiny with discipline, Kinsley," he whispered, his voice thick with satisfied dominance. "But you cannot win against the fated mate bond. Now stop fighting. Rest. We have a kingdom to prepare for your return." I clung to him, the heat overriding the rage, leaving me temporarily exhausted and compliant. The warrior was silenced, if only for a few moments, by the Omega's inescapable demands. Hours later, the storm finally began to abate. The howling winds died down, replaced by an eerie silence, and a thin, weak morning light began to filter through the small, frosted windows of Oakhaven Lodge. I woke nestled against Ronan, bundled in thick furs he had salvaged. The heat had ebbed slightly, leaving me drained and weak, but the sharp edges of my mind were returning. The collar felt cold, heavy, and unforgiving. Ronan was already awake, dressed in his heavy coat, silently preparing the meager supplies for the journey back to Blackwood Keep. He no longer treated me with the rough, casual friendship of yesterday. He moved with a careful, almost reverent distance, watching me with an intensity that felt smothering. When I finally stood, pulling on my heavy Beta Guard trousers, the uniform that was now a mere costume, Ronan stepped forward immediately. "You shouldn't exert yourself," he commanded, reaching out to steady me. I shrugged off his hand, forcing my muscles to work, forcing the image of the stoic guard back into place. "I am fine, Ronan. I can walk. If I am to be your queen, I will not enter Blackwood Keep, leaning on your arm like a fragile invalid." He watched me, a flicker of appreciation, the smallest acknowledgement of the warrior beneath the gold collar, crossing his face. "Very well," he conceded, though his tone indicated he was humoring me. "We leave now. The path will be treacherous, but the guard will meet us halfway to ensure your safe return. Remember, Kinsley, the securing mandate is in effect. Everything you do, every step you take, is now an act of politics. You fought to be seen as more than just an Omega. Now, you must use your status as queen to prove your worth." I fastened my coat, the cold morning air a welcome shock against my skin. I touched the heavy collar, accepting the new reality. The deception was over. The lie had shattered, but the core of who I was remained. I was a warrior who had found herself shackled by destiny, but not broken by it. As we stepped out of the rustic shelter of Oakhaven Lodge and into the deep, crisp snow, I looked back at the small cabin. It had been the site of my greatest failure and my most terrifying truth. I had lost the freedom of the Beta, but I had found the power of the Queen. Ronan had claimed me, secured me, and collared me, but the fight was far from over. He thought he had grounded his guard. He was about to discover that his Queen was just as dangerous, and infinitely more visible, than his hidden Beta. The campaign to redefine my identity within the walls of Blackwood Keep began now. I might wear his gold, but my loyalty would remain my own. Tap that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next upload.